My name is Dr. Joseph Munyua. Today, we are focusing on a research hypothesis. The Cambridge Dictionary defines the term hypothesis as an idea or explanation for something that is based on known facts but has not yet been proved. In other words, a hypothesis is a statement that provides an explanation for why or how something works based on facts or some reasonable assumptions, but that has not yet been tested. For instance, a hypothesis may be as follows. Christians' likelihood to trust a pastor is influenced by their perception of the pastoral competence of the said pastor. Christians' likelihood to trust a pastor is influenced by their perception of the pastoral competence of the said pastor. In this example, we have a statement about the relationship between perceptions of pastoral competence and likelihood to trust. The link between the two seems plausible and logical, but it is not proven in a scientific manner. Therefore, loosely speaking, this qualifies as a hypothesis. But strictly speaking, in the world of research, a hypothesis needs a few more criteria to constitute a true research hypothesis or scientific hypothesis. Let us focus on these criteria. What is a research hypothesis? A research hypothesis, also called a scientific hypothesis, is a statement about the expected outcome of a scientific study, such as a thesis or dissertation. For a hypothesis to be a genuine research hypothesis, this statement needs to have three attributes, namely clarity and specificity, testability, and falsifiability. Therefore, as demonstrated below, a research hypothesis must be clear and specific, testable, and falsifiable. Number one, clarity and specificity. A good research hypothesis needs to be clear about what is being assessed. That is, stating what and who is involved in the study. It should also be specific about the expected outcome. For instance, in this realm of clarity and specificity, a researcher can describe the involved variables and parties, and after that, state the expected outcome of the study. Number two, testability or provability. A research hypothesis must be testable to qualify as a scientific hypothesis. If it is not testable, it is not a research hypothesis. Testability means that a researcher must be able to methodically correct observable data to assess whether it supports the involved hypothesis or not. There should be a way to prove the claim. Take an example of the following hypothesis. There are invisible and unobservable forces that influence Kenyans' likelihood to trust their president. There are invisible and unobservable forces that influence Kenyans' likelihood to trust their president. Such a statement cannot be tested or verified because the forces are unobservable. Therefore, it is not a sound research hypothesis. Number three, falsifiability or disprovability. As said herein before, a scientific research hypothesis should be testable. This means that it can be proven true, but that is not enough. To be a good research hypothesis, it also needs to be falsifiable, that is, disprovable. In other words, there should be some identifiable way to test whether a research hypothesis is false. In research, if there is no way to assess whether a hypothesis is false, it is not a good research hypothesis. Take an example of the following hypothesis. Life exists on planets other than Earth. Life exists on planets other than Earth. Is this hypothesis testable or provable? Yes. Someone can set out a robotic spacecraft that can find life on other planets. But is this hypothesis falsifiable or disprovable? The answer is no. If someone decides to set out that same robotic spacecraft and it found no evidence of life on other planets, that discovery would not disapprove the stated hypothesis. To disapprove the stated hypothesis, somebody should visit every single planet in the universe or observe every planet in a detailed manner, which is not scientifically possible for now. Therefore, the statement is not disprovable. Hence, it is not a research hypothesis. A research hypothesis is a clear and specific, testable, and falsifiable proposition or a predictive statement about the possible outcome of the involved study. Obviously, the objectives of the study usher in the formulation of the testable hypothesis of the said study. Remember that in a research proposal, a research hypothesis is a supposition that will be tested by means of answering the research questions which proceed from the research objectives. In practice, a research hypothesis is the logical tentative solution or answer, that is the provisional response to the research problem before the actual study is conducted. Therefore, some good reading in one's area of study is necessary before any formulation of a research hypothesis. Strictly, a hypothesis is the researcher's anticipated or probable explanation regarding the results or findings of the study before the actual carrying out of the said study. The testing of a research hypothesis is attained through a methodical correction of the relevant data towards answering of the research questions, which also marks the meeting of the research objectives and the final attempt to solve the research problem. Therefore, generally speaking, a research hypothesis is also seen as a tentative answer to the research questions. To hit the nail on the head, a research hypothesis can be seen as a tentative solution to the involved research problem. It is in this context that the formulated research hypothesis enables the researcher to map out the involved research process and remain tightly focused during the carrying out of the study. Logically, at the peak of the study, a research hypothesis is tested. Herein, through the correction of the obtainable relevant data, a research hypothesis is naturally tested in order to establish whether the research findings reject or support it. A research hypothesis can be either a null hypothesis or an alternative hypothesis. A null hypothesis is a commonly accepted fact. It is the opposite of an alternative hypothesis. A null hypothesis is a general statement that states that there is no relationship between two variables or there is no association between two groups in a study. Therefore, A null hypothesis is the hypothesis that a researcher attempts to disprove in the study. A null hypothesis is a hypothesis that is capable of being objectively verified, tested, and even rejected. In their studies, researchers work to reject, nullify, or disapprove a null hypothesis. An alternative hypothesis is a statement that describes that there is a relationship between two selected variables in a study. It is an alternative to a null hypothesis. Researchers come up with an alternative hypothesis, one that they think explains a phenomenon, and then work to reject a null hypothesis. An alternative hypothesis is the hypothesis that is inferred if a null hypothesis is rejected. Put simply, an alternative hypothesis is an explanation for why a null hypothesis was rejected. Unlike a null hypothesis, an alternative hypothesis becomes a key focus of the study. Thank you for your time. Subscribe to this educational YouTube channel. Bye for now.